Hello, and welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that talks all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Katie Trapp.
And I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
From authors, editors, publishers, readers, and reviewers, and narrators, we all have a state of mental health and neglect talking about it. Or worse yet, we're ashamed to talk about it. Let's break that stigma. On today's episode, we're interviewing Emily Campbell, who is a reader of sapphic books. Welcome, Emily. It's nice to meet
Hi.
you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've really been looking forward to this.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are in our reading community?
Sure. So my name is Emily. I go by she, her pronouns. I joined the sapphic community, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. It's sort of in the pro process of me coming out and sort of discovering myself. And as part of the community, I really try to be there for, and recommend books for newer readers. And I also try to champion a lot of representation where I see it from trans or BIPOC authors, because I think that really can benefit the community as a whole when, you know, me as a white person, I know I gain a better understanding when I read a book written by a person of color, for example. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my deal. Just try to be, just try to helpfully recommend stuff to people. And
That's how we found you. Was in the Sapphic book lovers group, and
yes,
Katie's
yes.
like, Emily always comments. She always has these great things to comment. And I'm like, and why are you not messaging her to be on our podcast?
Oh, well, thank you. I try. I haven't been as active lately just because of life stuff that's happening. I'm planning a pretty big move, but yeah, no, I that's one of the joys I've really found is the Sapphic book lovers community for me was one of the first groups that I ever joined, and I'd never read a romance book in my life before I joined it. And I think the first one I read was one of Ashley Herring Blake's books, and I'm like, I'm in. You know, these are the books for me. You know, my mom is kind of uh, very critical of romance, and so I just kind of never gave it a second look. But part of coming out was also coming to terms with, feeling romantic for the first time and really seeing myself in these stories for the first time. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah, that's why I love the Sapphic book world. Just being able to see myself represented in the books.
It's
Makes
so
sense.
it's yeah, it's so important. I mean, I'm a little over 40 now, and the era that I grew up in was, I cottoned on to fantasy like Mercedes Lackey pretty early, like, and I stayed a fantasy and sci-fi fan for years. And looking back at that now, I think that's because that's where sapphic stories were being told. Um, so I haven't I switched to sapphic books and I don't know if I've read a fantasy or science fiction book since.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the other day the last time that I read a heteronormative book, and it took me a while to remember, and it's been years, I think. At least probably close to 2.
Yeah. And it's wonderful that that's available to us now. Like, I remember watching the episode of Ellen, when she came out in the 90s with my dad. That was a big deal. Like, that was really the only representation we had um, at that point. And just see the whole world has kind of opened up, and there's a streaming service that's just for sapphic romance movies. It's amazing.
Is that are you talking about Tello?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Never heard of that.
Tello Films, and it's John Cannon has a few of his books that were converted into film on there. I know the Riley Para series was, and then I think he had another one converted into a short story, and he writes a lot of scripts now for that, which if you don't know John Cannon, I love John Cannon. His stories are absolutely brilliant in my opinion.
Okay. No, I'm not familiar. I'll check them out.
Yeah, but I know he ended up with a couple through Tello, and I've been really impressed with the work that they've done for sure.
Yeah.
So you're a reader, and you've mentioned before that you have found comfort in books during difficult times. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the books that you found comfort in?
Um, I think sapphic romance was again, I used to be a huge fantasy and sci-fi reader. I've been a reader my entire life since I was before about 5 years old. Um, I've read a book before I go to bed every single night. And they were pretty, they were saying sci-fi, they were fantasy, and there wasn't really anything contemporary. There wasn't anything that I could point to and say, oh, that's me. But reading sapphic romance was the first time that I've read these books and I could say, oh, you know, things can work out. I had a really, really hard year last year. I lost my job in October of 2022. I was trying to immigrate to Canada and didn't end up working. Tried a lot of different things, worked at a hotel laundry for a little while, worked at a Starbucks for a little while till I was finally able to get a career again. But what these books really gave me was some hope and some courage to take some risks, because you read these books and you see, these characters took these risks and it worked out. And what I found since then is that, real life is not a romance book. Sometimes you're going to try and it's not going to work, and you're just going to have to try again. Sometimes the people are not going to, you know, be the wonderful people that we see in these books that are like, of course, I want to help you. I want to help you achieve your dreams. Um, but sometimes they are. And I would say probably my number one favorite book in the entire world, which sort of gets a little bit back to my sci-fi roots, is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Um, I just think it does things so well. The writing is beautiful. The it's hilarious. I laugh every time I watch it, I read it. The trans representation is great, and in my opinion, it's done perfectly. It's not really made a big deal about this character being trans. In fact, he says in the book, it's one of the least interesting things about me. Um, and it really, I'm moving to the East Coast soon, and that was, I think, the book that was kind of like, I think I would want to live in a big city. I think, I can see myself there. And if I hadn't been reading these books, I'm not sure I would have ever gotten there. Because again, all I knew was, the Heralds of Valdemar, or stuff like that, or Pern, if you're old like me and you read Anne McCaffrey's books. So it really gave me a window, and it gave me some hope into times when I really, really needed it. Like it was not a good year last year, and um, it really just kept me going, and it was a distraction too, um, when I needed it.
Would you say that your reading habits change um, by like what you have going on in your life?
I would say that I'm a little I'm a little more adventurous. Right now, I'm kind of in a mode where like things are pretty good for me, but a lot of my mental energy is, going to planning this move and, getting back into my career. So a lot of is I'm rereading a lot, which I tend to do sometimes. And when I think I'm not sure if things are bad that makes me more adventurous, or if I just have more energy to devote to it. Or, when I was living in New Mexico, I really didn't have anything other than my Kindle. My computer was usually put up, and all my stuff was in boxes. So I had a Kindle, and I had a subscription to Kindle Unlimited, which, I know there's better ways to buy books, but for me at that time, it was cheap, and it was, a way to entertain myself in times when I really, really needed it.
To be clear and for the record, there is no better way to read a book than to just read a book. There's no better way to buy a book than just to read a
Yeah.
book.
I, I
But it,
usually try, if I end up checking out books a lot from Kindle Unlimited, I try to buy them, just, because I've heard things from other authors that say, Kindle Unlimited is okay, but it's usually better to just buy directly from the author. So I really try to do that when I can.
yeah, we're gonna get slightly off topic right now. It it depends on what your aim is as an author. And there are advantages to buying direct from authors, and there are advantages to buying from Amazon. And the advantage to buying from Amazon is it helps with ranking. Every purchase helps with ranking. And so it keeps your book up in the ranking so more people can find it. Thus, hopefully, you get more income off of that. You just can't track it as well as the income that you get from a direct sale.
Okay.
But for me and for most authors, as long as you are reading the book, we don't really care. That's why we write the books, so that people can read them. That's why we publish them.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on a book that's on the backlog. I've done some outline work for it, written a couple scenes, but again, life stuff. And that's really all I want, is that when I write this book, I'll self-publish it. I don't care, whatever. I just want people to read it, I just want people to enjoy it.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about the ego and playing into playing into our ego when people read our books, but it's true.
Yeah, I Kindle Unlimited or purchasing outright. If I see that there's some activity, it just makes me happy. It just
Good.
makes me happy. I use Kindle Unlimited. We're a one income family, so I can't afford to buy books all the time. And that's one way I can enjoy
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
I make sure that I thumb all the way through, even if it's like a book that I do not finish books if I'm not enjoying them, but I'll thumb all the way through to make sure that the author gets the rest of the money.
And I
Oh,
am
I
not,
didn't realize that. I'll have to start doing that.
It's per page.
Okay. Okay.
and
I
I
will usually finish a book. Sometimes I just want to see how bad it gets.
there's a couple of those that I read, and then but I don't read that much. I don't have a lot of time. I wish I could read more, which is why I'm not a Kindle Unlimited family, because for me the cost is not useful to me. It's cheaper for me to buy this is how infrequently I read. It's cheaper for me to buy a book than it is to pay the $10 or whatever it is now for Kindle Unlimited a month, because I don't read that many books in a month. But yeah, I because of that I have zero patience. So I DNF books really quickly if I am not feeling it or not getting into it, because I don't have the time to waste on reading them and waiting them out for them to get good. Although sometimes it is a disaster in waiting, and you just kind of have to keep reading to find out how bad it gets.
I know a lot of people will like refuse to did not finish, and they're like, I have to finish it even if I don't enjoy it. And it's like, I read for enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not bringing me joy, I don't want to read it. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
slow reader. I don't have the mental capacity to just sit there and trudge through.
Well, at that
Sure.
point, is the pleasure they're getting from reading the book, or is the pleasure they're getting from ticking it off and saying, I completed this book?
True.
Because I can see that. Like, I get really excited when I finish reading books.
I generally finish books, but I also read fast, and more than anything, the past year especially, I haven't had a whole lot else going on, so it's really all I was doing was, you know, reading books. So it's like, do I keep reading? And sometimes I'll just leave a book halfway through and come back to it later if I'm not, in the mood for like a rom-com or something. Um, but it's a distraction, and
So
so.
you were talking about different books that have helped you. You mentioned One Last Stop, right? That you really
Mhm.
connected with. Um, what are some other books that you've really connected with, I guess, particularly in this last year? And what was it about them that you connected with specifically? I think this is the question all authors want answered.
Okay. Um, well, I wrote a pretty long review of I think your latest book because I connected so deeply with it. The story about um, my stepmother was an alcoholic who was in recovery for years. My mom is an alcoholic as far as I know. Um, and I guess the reason why it's just nice to see that represented on page. Again, it comes back to representation for me. Um, the thing that I like about romances in particular is that there's a happy ending. There's a guaranteed happy ending. And I feel honestly, I've read a few, well, one that I can think of that did not have a happy ending, and I felt betrayed. I was like, this isn't what I signed up for, Like, I didn't sign up for one of the characters to die in the last chapter. Like, um, but for me, if I guess the other thing that I like to see is older characters. Again, because I'm 41, I came out at 38. Older characters finding that relationship and finding that love. Because for a very, very long time, while I was sort of still repressing myself, I was just like, well, that's not in the cards for me. Um, to read books with, a lot of some of them are age gaps, some of them are handled better than the other, but women over 40 who are, and I think there's a lot of women who are in their late 30s or 40s who are newly out. Some of them have ex-husbands. Um, I think it's really nice to see some of those books. I think one of my other favorite books is When You Least Expect It by Haley Cass. Again, it's, you know, this is a woman that's been through it. She thought she was straight for a really long time. She went through hell, and she came out the other side and she found the love of her life. And that's another thing that I find inspiring. A lot of women who were really able to find love later in life. And I think that's really important, sort of representation.
Yeah, I love books with older characters. I cannot get into YA at all. Like, I can't relate to a 19-year-old. I don't, they're kids.
There's
Like,
there's been a few that are just kind of standouts to me. Like I Kissed Shara Wheeler, or
I tried that one so many times and I could not get past chapter one. YA,
Fair.
and I just kept going, this is YA. I can't, it's the storyline seems so interesting, which is why I picked it up. And then I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
I spend
That
enough of my time around children and high schoolers. I think I'm just like done.
that's fair. And maybe if I was involved more with high schoolers, and I would feel the same way. Um, I think I bought Girls Like Girls by Haley Kayoko just because it was by Haley Kayoko. I
Oh,
read it once,
that
and
cover is gorgeous.
I've only ever seen it in black and white.
Oh, it is to die for. It is gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, go look it up.
I will. I will. But yeah, I'm the same way. I tend to avoid YA stuff And I think there's a book that I have never seen talked about. I don't remember the author's name, but it's called Rekindling the Spark. And it's about two women in their 40s who are having marital problems, and they go to a therapist, and the whole book is them like reconnecting, remembering why they fell in love. Um, and I just love those kinds of stories. I think we see a lot of 20s, 30s, which is fine. Um, but I also like to see the older women. I mean, that's my demographic.
That's by Hildred Billings.
Okay.
Oh, she wrote my favorite book that I read last year, Desperate Times. I ate that up.
I'll check it out.
It was my first time reading Butch, and I was just like, I want to see how this goes. And I loved it.
I will
You know what? Sorry, go ahead.
I will fully admit I have never read one of Hildred's books, but she is a hoot and I enjoy her company so much.
It's just like
Well,
she doesn't hold back when she's writing. It's just
yeah.
She doesn't hold back in personality either.
Well, that was the other thing that I really enjoyed about Rekindling the Spark. They fell into these prescribed roles of like, oh, butch top, femme, bottom. But the whole relationship, the whole kind of story was, you know, that sort of role reversal of like, oh, you know, we just fell into these roles because that was kind of part of the script. It's kind of ridiculous that even lesbian romances are following a script, about who's top and who's bottom, but whatever. I love to see when people discover something new about themselves. So I would recommend that one too if you're like me and you're into, I guess, more different stories, more than because I like a good rom-com as much as the next person, but I always like it when, authors do something a little bit different.
yeah, makes it a little bit more interesting.
For sure.
Um, how do you feel about the amount of representation in books and having access to them in the community? Do you think there's enough, or
I think there could be more. I think there could always be more. Like I said earlier, I tend to seek out I think um it's a Chris and Devon Plan a Wedding or Devon and Chris Plan a Wedding.
Yeah.
Was either my second or third book that I saw at the library, and I'm like, yes, that. Um, because I'm interested in championing that. I'm obviously a huge proponent of trans characters when it's done right. Um, and I love to see that kind of representation. And that was one of the I think I was reading Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, and it was just, very off the cuff. Oh, this person is non-binary, not even a major character, but they're there. Um, I love to see sort of that offhand, introduction of this person is trans, this person is non-binary. And I love to see, um, people of color writing books about people of color. In my mind, I'm learning something new because this is a world that I'm not a part of. And I get to read that and experience that and, learn something a little bit. I think that's one of the greatest gifts of reading is how much it teaches empathy. Um, and so I really try to go out of my way to read and to recommend books that do that. Um, I think the representation is good. Um, but I think it could always be better.
I think it's definitely growing from I've been in the sapphic book world publishing for 10 years now, and I have seen it drastically increase in those 10 years, and particularly in these last like 2-ish years. And it has been amazing to just see the diversity, see the number of authors that we now have. It's not your same old standard 10. And just to see the number of people who are voraciously reading. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, stepping more into the personal side of things, you've mentioned before in SBL, and I think you mentioned it to Katie that you were raised by gay parents in the 80s and the 90s. What was that like for those of us raised by straight people?
Um, I will say that my coming out experience with my dad was like the easiest thing I ever did. I sent him a text message and he was like, "Cool, we love you." That was it, you know. Growing up, uh, I grew up in a college town in Kansas, so it's a pretty conservative area. And like I didn't know any different, you know. My parents were just my parents, and it was my mom and dad are divorced. They lived about 6 blocks away from each other, and week on, week off sort of thing. But that was just my family, and I didn't know there was anything weird about that until I was in the third grade, and like the kids at school found out about it, and that was, oh, I remember my brother actually got angry with me because I told somebody that my mom was gay. And he's like, "Why did you say that? I've just been telling people that they're roommates. Why did you say that?" I didn't know that I was supposed to hide. Um, but I can say that growing up the way that I did, um, I have seen things change so radically. I used to get called the F slur, on a daily basis. And now that is just so completely unacceptable. I literally remember the switch when I went back to college in 2009 in a small town in Kansas where I could tell people, "Oh, my parents are gay," and they go, "Oh, that's really cool. That's interesting." And, you know, it was fine. Um, I've seen such a huge shift over my lifetime. It really gives me a lot of hope. And I've seen the representation grow in media. Like it still blows my mind a little bit now that I can live my life and just decide that I am not going to consume any media that's made by a straight white man anymore. That's an option that I have. Um, and I usually take it. Um, so a lot of um, it was a lot of hiding in the beginning, except to people in theater, because half of them are queer anyway.
Only half?
Um, Probably more.
Probably more. I
Uh,
didn't realize that you lived in Kansas.
yeah, yeah.
I lived there for 6 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on the other side of the state though, the really conservative side of the state.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
out by Dodge City and Garden City.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That that's rough.
Yeah.
Uh,
There was a reason why we left.
yeah, well, there's a reason why I'm leaving too. So, I'm not, you know, I'm not in the college town anymore. Um,
Yeah.
Actually, I'm in a more conservative part of the state, and I've definitely run into transphobia here. I've definitely run into people, giving me looks and feeling unsafe. And um, I also know what it was like to live in a blue state for 3 months. I lived in New Mexico, and it was just totally different.
It
You
is.
see, women walking down the street holding hands, and it was just no big deal.
Yeah, it's funny because I now live in Wyoming, which you wouldn't think is much better than Western Kansas, but because I'm in the state capital and because it's much bigger here, it is much better than where I was in Kansas.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah. And I think the transphobia now is it's just so bad. I mean, and I say somebody, you know, I don't know if it's better or worse than the homophobia was in my parents' day. Um, I'm incredibly proud of my dad. He was incredibly involved in activism in the 90s. And he took me to the March on Washington in 93. Um, and he pushed a lot. He's been a rabble rouser my whole life. You know, he's involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement in the 70s. But I think transphobia is as bad or maybe worse now than the homophobia was in the 80s or 90s. Like,
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier today, actually, in Messenger. Just the amount of transphobia, the amount of turfs around that you don't expect to be there, and then they suddenly
yeah,
say something and they pop up, and you're like, oh, yes, I know who you are. Yeah, it's that's one thing I'm enjoying about the sapphic book community, and particularly just calling it sapphic, right? Because when I started,
hmm
that wasn't a thing. And just the community being more open to people who are different and more diverse. I absolutely love and adore that. And I know we're in this like rough time of transition, and I'm hoping it gets more diverse as we go, but it doesn't make the roughness any less hard.
I have not, and I know that they're out there. I know that, you know, lesbian turfs exist. I count myself fortunate. I have not run into a single one. You know, everyone has been very, very welcoming. And I don't know if it's going to be the same when I move to the East Coast. I was talking to my therapist about, I found there's this tool I found from TikTok called Everywhere is Queer, and they list like queer meetup groups and all this other stuff. And I found a couple groups out there, and there's a lesbian bar that's like an hour drive away, and I'm like, yes, please. Um, and my therapist was going, well, you know, you might encounter some turfs, and I hadn't actually thought about it until that moment, just because my experience online with, you know, the Sapphic um, Facebook group, Sapphic book lovers group, and there's another Sapphic group that I'm a part of, you know, have absolutely been so welcoming. So I count myself fortunate for that.
I'm so glad that that is what you have found and that it hasn't been the opposite.
I think if anybody tried in the Sapphic book lovers group, they'd find themselves shouted down pretty quickly.
Pretty quick.
Pop up occasionally, but somebody will usually report it or they'll dogpile on them. But it does pop up. We try to weed them out as much as we can, but in the comment section, you can only do so much
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes. But I don't know. It we often have people argue what sapphic is. It's
Yes.
like it's an umbrella term. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just one term. It's like,
It's like, let me go get my rainbow umbrella that I literally have in my hall closet, and we'll just explain what it all means.
and if that doesn't work, bye. We don't we don't need we
Yeah,
got
yeah,
we don't need negativity on this. It's
yeah.
it's something.
And honestly, seeing other people, I haven't seen it in Sapphic book lovers. I've seen it in a Star Trek meme group I'm a part of, but seeing people dogpile on transphobes is just, it's it makes me feel safe, and it makes me feel great because like these people are just getting hounded in a, until they leave the group, as they should. Like, we've got no time for it, you know. Especially now, like, trans people really need all the allies that we can get these days. And, you know, if you're really not going to be an ally and stand up like an ally, like, you need to, like, we need you, really need you right now. That's my little soapbox for a moment. So,
It's a great soapbox to be on.
We all have those soapbox moments occasionally. I'm just happy to hear somebody say something positive about the group. That makes me happy.
Oh, I've never, I don't think I've encountered anything negative in that group.
That's just because being a moderator, Katie gets all of the negative.
Oh, yeah. Well, from, I guess, a power user perspective, I'm not seeing it, so good job.
Burden of leadership, Katie.
Oh, leadership. All right. So you touched a little bit about mental health. Would you tell us a little bit about your own experiences with mental health?
Sure. So I was diagnosed bipolar 2, I think in 2008, so I've been managing it for a while. I've got some CPTSD. I was in a pretty abusive situation when I was in my younger 20s. Um, surprised you spend literal decades recovering from that. But I've got a wonderful therapist that I've been working with for the past several years. And to me, managing my mental health is really like, I sort of call it like treating myself like a toddler sometimes, like a toddler. If, I don't get good night's sleep, if I don't eat regular meals, if I don't drink enough water, I get cranky. Um, so those are some of the kind of things that I do.
We call it putting on the kid gloves in our house.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I just look at my husband and I'm like, I need kid gloves today. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, and I will remind you that when you forget to put them on, as you inevitably will, but I do too. But yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
call it, putting on the kid gloves.
So I've kind of been through a lot in my life. I'm moving to the East Coast, which is the third time in my life that I'm starting completely over from scratch. I took a big gamble in 2022 and I thought you know, the anti-trans stuff is getting out of control. I want to get out of here. I'm going to immigrate to Vancouver, British Columbia. Sold my house, got rid of most of my stuff, and I bet it all, and I lost in a big way. Canada doesn't want people that are over 40 and don't have a job already lined up, which um, I could have been more diligent about that. But I was just kind of like, oh, it'll work out. Uh, so for me, really what keeps me going is curiosity because I never know what's gonna happen. I when I was 19 or 20 and if this gets too dark, just please stop me. I was hospitalized for attempting and I could not even imagine my life now. I could not imagine, and as hard as things are now, I could not imagine how much joy I would have now just from being myself, just from living authentically as I am. And to think that that almost didn't happen, like I still think about that. It's like you don't know what's going to happen next. And, there's going to be real bad times sometimes. But I think, yeah, curiosity, just really what's going to happen next? Because I don't know. I've been here for 41 years. I still don't know what's going to happen next.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great, great philosophy to have.
Things change so rapidly, and then like just out of nowhere,
Hmm.
it's insane. Like I don't know what 19-year-old Katie would expect at my age, but it probably isn't what it is now. In a good way. In a good way. I grew up in Tennessee, so it wasn't exactly the most open, but it was
Yeah.
not near as bad as it could be.
Yeah. Well, I was not expecting to be on a podcast today either. Like, you know, with authors that I have read and enjoyed their work. Um, so that just kind of blew my mind. Especially as I don't know if I'll ever finish writing this book. I want to, but as somebody who's sort of an aspiring author myself, it was like, oh my God, like this was out of left field and completely unexpected. I would not have called this.
Yeah, I think your name came up because AJ somebody had posted something a little negative, a little
No,
negative.
no. It actually came up because of the review on Maybe Someday.
Yeah, remember there was a negative post made, and I said something about there being a positive one a few days ago that
Yeah.
you hadn't read, and it was Emily's, and I was like, I screenshot it and sent it, and then like I told her a few things that you had been open with, I think last summer, about your move and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, why don't you see if she wants to be on the podcast? So
Yeah, I don't, as much as I'm in the groups, I'm not in the groups. And so I missed some things. And so I'm really glad Katie pointed that out to me because I wouldn't have missed it and not seen it. But yeah, I was like, these are the people that we want to be on the podcast. That's the whole reason that we're doing this. So I'm really glad that you agreed to come sit with us because I know that can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, well, I like to talk a lot, so and I was thrilled that like whenever you commented, I just kind of had like, oh my God moment, um, because I've read and enjoyed your books multiple times. I think I said in another post, like they are sort of a comfort read for me because they're dealing with a lot of really huge issues, like inside these halls. I was
Yeah.
inside these halls, within these halls,
Inside these.
um, inside these halls. You're dealing with a narcissistic ex, and it deals with very heavy stuff, but they get through it. And I think that's sort of the quintessential thing, about these stories that make them so valuable to me. Number one, these are our stories. I remember thinking that the first time I ever read a sapphic romance, I'm like, these are our stories. Um, I've often heard, people talk about science fiction as used as a vehicle to, talk about current social issues. So is romance, and sapphic romance especially. Like,
Yeah, so I had a whole conversation with somebody one time and they're like, romance shouldn't be political. And I literally commented back, I'm like, I'm so glad that the romance you can write cannot be political. Welcome to your privilege. And I
yeah.
was like, do you not realize what you just said? Like literally every book or story I write, because just by its very nature of being sapphic is political. There is a
Mhm.
political statement in it. I was so mad. I think I ranted about that for like a whole week and a half. I was so mad. My husband was done with it. He was like, just shut up already. And I was like, no.
I mean, 10 years ago, it wasn't even legal for us to get married.
Yep.
20 years ago, there were literally, I remember touring the AIDS quilt in Kansas City. People were dying. It was a genocide, and nobody cared.
Mm.
Um, or maybe 30 years ago, I might be showing my age. But these are important stories, and they're told through the vehicle of genre fiction, just like science fiction is, just like Star Trek.
Janeway.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Janeway in a tank top.
Yes. Macrocosm.
Yes.
Way to go. Best episode. Not quite, but one of the best episodes. All right, so we are wrapping up, which we do a rapid fire, 5 questions. So you have to come up with the first answer. that is relevant to the question itself. I think that's how it goes. Amy usually does that one. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Okay. So what is your dream destination vacation?
God, I don't even know. I'm just gonna say England, London. I'm a huge history buff, so um, I just love learning about that stuff.
What trope are you, whether in relationships or you as a person?
Um, I was very, very rudely called out by romance novels at being an ice queen. Um, and that is something that I was like, oh girl, you gotta work on that. You gotta let people in. But that again is something that makes it valuable. When you see yourself in a story, you can start to sort of see areas that you need to improve for sure.
And it stands to give credence to my theory that every ice queen is an ice queen because of trauma.
That's absolutely true. That is absolutely right. Like we have experiences or we grow up, with these experiences where we try to connect emotionally with people and are shut down in some way or the other. And then we sort of become the ice queen without even realizing. I don't never meant to push anybody away. I've lost a lot of good relationships. My best friend he's the person that stuck around through all of it. And I called him on the phone over the summer when I was at my absolute worst. And I was just like, I don't even know why you're still around me. Like, thank you for being here. Like, this is the absolute worst of me. And he's like, and I'm still here.
Those people are gold.
Yes.
Where did you see kindness today?
Today, um, I'm not sure. I haven't left the house all day. I'm not sure. Um, Usually I try and create it when I'm out in the world. Um, I think that I think kindness is one of the most powerful things you can do. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to be kind, and it has such a huge effect. I call it sort of an exponential effect, You're the least little bit kind to somebody and you make their whole day, compliment their hair, their makeup, their shoes or whatever, So,
I
but I
like
haven't, go ahead.
instead of asking my kids when I pick them up from school, like how their day was, I like to ask them how they were kind. So I'm
I
like,
like
how are you
that.
kind today? It's just kind of a different conversation starter. They get really tired of the how are
Yeah.
you? What did you do?
I have a friend her thing and she calls herself, I think it's a movement called militant kindness. So, she challenges herself in ways like she carries a roll of quarters with her and refills people's parking meters, She challenges herself to be kind every day, and challenges other people. And she's somebody that I've really looked up to for that.
It's a really good challenge. What is your philosophy on good mental health?
I touched on this before, but as you said, treating with kid gloves, I'm not at my best when I don't have a consistent bedtime, get enough sleep, eat. I'm not going to say right, but, eat, just eat, um, drink water, just take care of myself, otherwise I'm a toddler.
And where did you find joy this week?
Uh, I saw a bald eagle the other day out at the lake, out at the reservoir. I'm in kind of a industrial city. It's not the prettiest, but I've been going out to this lake, not too far away from my house, just to kind of get out of the house a little bit. And the whole lake is frozen over. There's snow everywhere. And I know people like to hate on this weather, but I love it. I think it's gorgeous. I know it's like negative a billion degrees out, but I just think there's something so beautiful about winter. And I try to find just joy in just small things, like seeing a bald eagle. That was cool.
That's pretty awesome. All right, that's all for our latest episode of Bookish in a Balance. We would like to thank Emily for sharing with us today, and we'd also like to thank our listeners for tuning in and getting to know Emily. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with our latest episode. And until next time, take care out there, and remember that we are all in this together. We forgot the
Thank you.
papers.
Yeah, I've got them. Normally we
Tell
take paper
Emily about it.
and we throw it,
Hmm.
but we've yet to get it correct. And I forgot to tell you. See, when you're the one that does the introductions, and I'm blaming Amy. Blaming Amy.
Ames, because they're not here to defend themselves.
They
Well,
they threw me off. They were supposed to be here.